What's the most fricked up thing you've seen on public transportation? I once saw a homeless guy in Chicago play 30 seconds of When the Saints Go Marching In on a trumpet and then proceed to drop his pants and take a massive dump in the middle of the L. Thing is, half the people on the train didn't even flinch. I honestly don't remember if it was on the brown line. He must have hit the brown note. I once saw an argument escalate until one guy stabbed the other with the smallest blade on the smallest Swiss Army knife I've ever seen. Best part was the guy that got stabbed telling everyone not to worry because he deserved it and they were settling an argument. They got off the bus together and walked off in the same direction, so who knows. A few years ago, on a bus in Edinburgh heading home through a slightly dodgy area, there's only a couple people on the upstairs deck. Myself, a teenage boy with headphones on, and an old lady minding her own business. A guy gets on, maybe 30ish, total chav wearing a tracksuit etc. wanders to the back of the upstairs deck. I start to smell something weird, nothing I could identify, just weird and kind of nice in a chemically way. I turn around and so does the old lady. Chav guy is lighting his crack pipe, makes eye contact with old lady first and says, very politely, "Oh, I'm sorry hen. It's just my crack. Hope you didn't mind." Proceeds to smoke his crack for rest of journey. At least he was polite. One time on a bus, this woman who was about 8 months pregnant and had a 4-year-old child with her didn't get up to give her seat to an old lady. The old lady did not want the seat. She saw the pregnant lady would have had a hard time standing, and with the kid too, it would have been a mess. But some crazy woman didn't like it and kept yelling, "Put that kid on your lap." The woman had no lap. She was 8 months pregnant, and the old lady and the pregnant woman ignored her. The crazy lady was mad, so she lunged over, grabbed the pregnant woman by the head and smashed her into the window, also smashing the 4-year-old, who was in the inside seat. Blood everywhere. Everyone bugged out, wailing from the child and pregnant woman. Pregnant woman had nail marks bleeding on her forehead. Her nose was bleeding. The crazy lady just bounced off the bus at the next stop, but there were about 1 million plainclothes cops around. They brought her back and the whole bus was like, "Yeah, her." Freaking heck. Just reading this makes me seethe. Justice. A homeless man beating his dong like it owed him money 3 seats away from me after a night at the bars. This was on the Red Line in Chicago. Can't say I am surprised. I got serenaded on a train once by an old Aboriginal man playing the didgeridoo. He also kept calling me Moira. That's not my name. On a separate occasion I got asked to be someone's baby mama in exchange for a laptop. I declined. I already have a laptop. I used to work from 12:09 p.m. in Boston and took the train home. It was great Monday, Thursday because the trains were mostly empty at noon. Just folks going into Boston for lunch. And it was dead on the ride home, so I got my choice of seats. No crowd, etc. But on Fridays, man, on Fridays, everyone bouncing around various parts of the city bar hoping, coming home from games, or whatever. Everyone was either drunk, on their way to drunk, or already passed out. My favorite too. 1 girl, maybe mid-20s on a Friday night, blacked out, all black clothes, jet black hair, black eyeshadow, black nail polish, etc. She's just standing there holding onto a pole and all of a sudden a mouse or rat crawls out from her bust and crawls up to her shoulder. She gives the thing a kiss and it runs back down and up her shirt sleeve. 2. Drunk guy, likely homeless but I'm not sure, is laying down across 4 or 5 seats, facing outward, eyes closed. Everyone is mostly steering clear, and I'm standing in front of his face. I've been on the train for about half an hour when he opens his eyes abruptly, grabs my wrist, looks dead at me and says, "What time is it?" I look at my phone, give him the time, and he says, "Oh, thank God, I've peed myself," and then passes back out. That girl seems perfect for a dark Disney princess movie. There was a quite fashionably dressed man coming out of the metro in Paris in high heels, stockings, and a nice flowy skirt. He then proceeded to hike up said skirt, grabbed a carrot from his bag and proceeded to commit a brutal act of autosodomy for all the world to see. My girlfriend was not as impressed as I was when I drew her attention to this act of public self-love. I bet his eyesight is fabulous. Not fricked up, but made me say what the frick. My first time in New York City, I get on the subway with my friends and a tough looking guy with 3 teardrop tattoos, often meaning you have killed people, went to jail, are in a gang etc. Gets on and sits across from us. He stares at us for a minute with this indescribable anger in his eye. He looks to his left and looks to his right as though he is checking for witnesses. Coast is clear. Me and my friends are crapping ourselves thinking we're about to get mugged, beaten up. Instead, he nods at us, reaches into his backpack, and takes out a copy of Twilight, New Moon. Evidently the movie was coming out soon and he wanted to make sure he finished the book before going to see it. The tattoos probably mean how many Twilights he has read. A man was verbally abusing his laddie friend mother of their child about how she was fricking up the kid and that the kid would turn up gay, and I don't want no F for a son. The kid was like 18 months old. A random man told the guy to back off, and the guy punched the man in the face. Another time, some teens were giving a transgender woman crap, calling her names, and I told them to back off her. I got punched in the ear. The transgender lady thanked me and we exited the bus as fast as humanly possible. A guy tried to sell me lean, codeine, cough syrup and Sprite for about 2 weeks straight, every day on my way to school. MSP's Metro Transit. Great times. In Philadelphia, I saw a woman who was crazy high on M on the subway. She was passed out and laying on her stomach to keep her body from falling over. Very overweight. She went into a seizure, threw up and then choked on her vomit. 2 gentlemen helped her out and turned her onto her side, but was too late and she essentially died before they can get to the next stop and get her to the hospital. At my school we have a bus that runs between the boys' campus and the girls' campus. We pretty much go to the same school. We attend classes and events at both campuses, but we sleep at one or the other. Anyway, it was a Saturday night and I was on the 1:30 AM bus back to the men's campus. Last bus is at 2 AM, and I saw a girl starting to rub up and down this guy's leg. Then she reached into his pants and started giving him a hand job. She put her purse in front of his dong to block it and pretended no one noticed. The poor guy proceeds to finish into her purse. Like 3 minutes in, he then passes out right after putting his dong away. After a minute or 2 of complete shock, she gets really mad at him and slaps him in the dong. He wakes up a gasp of pain and pukes everywhere. TL. DR. Drunk. Frisky. College students on a bus home from the bars. In Atlanta, the airport lies at the very end of one rail line. On the way there, a dejected homeless woman had been walking up and down the car repeatedly asking in a flat voice for $2 to get something to eat. About 2 stops away, she shuffles by another homeless man who was in some way mentally impaired and had mostly been laughing and clapping the whole time. He looks at her and shouts, "Ain't no $2 sandwiches at the airport," and goes back to his own little world. The woman slumps into a seat and begins to weep as the rest of the car rides on in silence. That sounds about right for Marta. I was on the 6th train heading into 23rd Saint Station in NYC when a sleeping man suddenly woke up and began masturbating furiously. Not at anybody in particular, but he was making some hilarious faces while he did it. Some old Chinese dude sitting next to him looks over and just gives no fricks, because he's happy to have a seat rather than stand. Needless to say, the train emptied at the next stop, and everybody went back to the next car. In that car, a man in a wheelchair had explosive diarrhea that covered the floor and soaked his clothing. The stench was so overwhelming I could smell it from the platform. People were rushing from that train car to pile into the masturbator car. It was the worst musical chairs game ever. Not wanting to have to wait for the next train, most people picked a poison and bore the pain. I think that would officially just frick someone's day. I was in the army stationed out in Hawaii and took the bus back to base one drunken morning. At one of the stops, an old man with wild hair, think Einstein, got on the bus and sat next to me. A few minutes later he slowly reached into a paper bag and pulled out a cottage cheese container. He pulled the lid off and just stared inside for a minute. He reached in and removed something that looked like an octopus head. It was grey, mottled and slimy, and then he proceeded to rub it on his bare forearm. Everyone on the bus was staring at him in surprise and disgust. He stared at his arm for another minute, replaced whatever it was in the plastic container, and returned it to his bag. He never said a word and got off a few stops later. It was weird. Home remedies can get pretty intense. Summer is always interesting. Saw the mother one time with a youngish girl. I guess maybe 8 for sure, old enough that this wasn't necessary. Anyway, girl said she had to pee. Mom doesn't look for a restroom. Pulls down her shorts, holds a cup up to her and tells her to go right there. Now I know the public restrooms are nasty, but Jesus, she could hold it and at least look for one. At least she used a cup. Poor girl. A few years ago I was getting off the bus and starting to walk away when I heard someone calling out to me. I turned around and saw this tall, gangsterly dressed black dude waving something in his hands through the window. It was my then brand new first generation iPhone. He gave it back to me and told me to be more careful. This happened on a third world country. As I saw the bus driving away, I distinctly remember thinking, what the frick did just happen? Truly bizarre. The world is filled with awesome people. Only crazy people are likely to be met. We just called him Urine Man. Somehow, if it was a superpower, it was less horrific. Being in a college town, I didn't have a car, and the buses were free with my id, so I had a bit too much time to spend on public transportation. Periodically, the bus would stop and this large, obese man would enter the bus. He'd usually sit down near the front and not look at anyone. I'd usually be in the back, but it'd be a noticeable wave as some stench emanated from where he was. When it got to me, my eyes started watering. Pure urine. It was so strong people started coughing and gagging. It just grew to encompass the entire bus. He didn't react. He didn't do anything. He just sat there like a giant sack of suet, hanging over the seat. I got off at the bus terminal, closely followed by everyone else on the bus. As for the bus, it was suddenly not in service and needed to be cleaned. Such a stench. I probably won't ever forget it. And this was regular. I'd see him once every 2 weeks or so, and every time it was the same. The smell of urine would coat the entire bus, and it was impossible to breathe properly. We just called him Urine Man. He appeared in a daze and left with a yellowish haze. He appeared in a daze and left with a yellowish haze. You are poet, but I assume you know it. 2 years ago, I was on a night train going from St. Petersburg to Moscow. In the same carriage as me, there were these 2 Russian guys. From their drunken ramblings we could sort of pick up that they were father and son-in-law. They had a bunch of large, 2-liter soda bottles with them, filled with beer. About a quarter of an hour into the 7-hour ride, they were crap-faced drunk and harassing the girls in the carriage to the point where the train personnel asked us to wear long sleeves and trousers lest the men lost control over themselves. At around midnight, however, one of my friends who was traveling with me woke up because he heard a noise like the trickling of water. He tried closing the window because he thought it was raining, but no. When he flipped on the lights, it turned out the older Russian dude had woken up and had taken it upon himself to pee all over the goddamn floor. He was just waddling around the carriage, dong out, spraying onto the feet and backpacks of my friends. My friend started screaming at him to frick off, at which point his son-in-law woke up and promptly puked all over the place. The train was pulled to a stop at the next station, somewhere way out in bumfuck nowhere between Moscow and St. Petersburg, and they kicked the dudes out. It was pretty bizarre. TLDR. Drunk Russian dudes peed and puked all over my friend's feet and stuff. Drunk Russian. Well, that's just redundant. I was in Holland, and me and some of my military buddies were taking a bus down to Eindhoven. It was about an hour and a half long trip with all of the stops. I had to pee, but figured the trip was only going to take like 30 minutes and I could make it. An hour into the trip I finally had to ask the bus driver if he could wait for me while I went and pee at the next stop, and he said okay, just hurry. So we pulled up to the next bus stop thing, and there were 2 polity guys chilling. I couldn't hold it any longer, so I just thought I'd go a bit further away. So I walked over to the bushes back behind the little bus terminal, and didn't see this massive, steep drop off of a ditch in my path. I fall into it, cut my leg and arm up a bit, and get completely muddy grassy. So I get up, pee, and climb out and jog back to the bus. So then I'm just walking back to the bus, covered in blood, mud, grass, and pee. The cops and everyone on the packed bus just look sympathetically at me like I'm completely retarded and obviously not quite able to pee on bushes without fricking myself up beyond recognition. This homeless man came up to me one night on BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit, and sat down next to me, essentially cornering me in the window seat. I thought he was going to give me the whole classic woe is me, money will help tale, but instead he simply removed some wrappings from his leg and revealed a wound that was rotting to the bone. Like, it was so gross that I couldn't believe it was real and he was still able to walk or be alive, I guess. I gave him $5 and wished him well. I didn't know what else to do. Was on the bus in Boston, and a woman sat down in front of me. I triggers to move when I noticed little bugs crawling in her hair. Then she proceeded to start coughing. She turns toward the woman with a baby in a stroller next to her and coughs right in the baby's face. The mother stands up and starts yelling at the women. They get into a screaming match. Then the mother has enough of it, backhands the other women and gets off the bus and yells "fricking C" as she steps off. Some time ago in Toronto, a guy in a mobility scooter gets into the subway car, pulling a dog by a leash. The guy has a pretty bad wound in one of his legs. After a few minutes he sort of rips a fleshy part out of his leg and throws it to his dog, who proceeds to munch on it. That's badass. I was in Boston when I was 16. My friend and I were going to a concert. It was the first time both of us had been on a train in our lives, so we were kind of worried we would get lost. The train pulls up, and our luck, an empty cart. Nobody was in it for some reason. Turns out some giant 7-foot tall guy was getting sucked off by his girlfriend. The police went in after us and escorted him out. He came as we entered. He came as we entered. Oh, I bet he did. When I lived in the Rainier Beach area of Seattle, I was without a car for about 9 months. I was forced to ride public transportation to and from work, school act. Besides homeless dudes sleeping, boozed up homeless druggies alkies trying to get in my pants. The weirdest thing I ever experienced was when I was on my way back to my apartment after a 10-hour shift at the restaurant I worked at. Some random homeless creepy dude asked me for my number. I said no thanks. He kept asking me for my number and kept saying no. After the 4th time of this, he starts crying saying I don't think he's pretty enough. I hate him and he'll never have a serious girlfriend. I move seats at this point. He follows me, sits across from me and starts crying about how dare I dump him. He has a lot to offer me. I said, dude, really? I have no idea who the heck you are. And then he looks at me and says, wasn't I good enough for you? I loved you long time last night. I can do it again. Then random creepy homeless smelly dude drops his pants, pulls out his dong and begins to masturbate to show me how long he can love me, all while crying about how I won't even give him a chance to prove his love to me. Shudder when I got off at my stop. He screams, that's right B, go ahead and leave me, I don't need your skank butt in my life, and flips me the bird. One time I saw 2 people with Down syndrome going at it. It was definitely the sloppiest Macabre I had ever seen, and progressed to the point where he was grabbing her chest and they were humping each other and grunting. It was very uncomfortable as everyone pretended not to stare, and finally someone came up to them and told them that was something they should save for when they are in private. Story from a friend of mine. He was on a train here in England about 20 years ago. The carriage was empty apart from my friend and 2 other guys. The 2 guys kept going to the toilet together every 15 minutes or so, then came out together looking high as balls 5 minutes later. They did this for at least an hour. So my friend's stop is coming up and he needs the toilet. Just as he is about to get up, the 2 guys both stand up and get there first. My friend sits down. 5 minutes later only one of the men comes out of the toilet. 15 minutes pass and the other guy still doesn't come out. So my friend is thinking that he must have changed carriage or something. So he decides to go to the toilet quick before his stop. He sees the door is slightly open, so he opens it, and then he finds him. The other guy who hadn't come out of the toilet 15 minutes before was laid on the floor, not moving, foaming at the mouth, covered and sick with a needle hanging out of his arm. The 2 guys had been injecting H every 15 minutes for well over an hour. The worst thing is that the other guy who returned to his seat must have witnessed his friend overdosing. Then he just left him with the needle in his arm and did nothing to help him. This one time on a night bus, at like 2 AM, back home from a night out, a large group of guys and 1 girl got on and sat right up the back of the bus. Friends and I got on. are minding our own business when the one girl starts spitting at people sitting closest to her. They move, but we stay put, thinking she is just drunk on something. Next thing they all light up cigs and start screaming at the bus driver to let them open the windows. Bus driver doesn't do crap, and at this point everyone on the bus is cautiously glancing around hoping these kids don't do anything too stupid. Finally some of them get up and make their way off the bus. Before I know it, that one girl has whacked her lit cig into my eye and I start kind of whimpering, screaming cause that crap hurt. Friend beside me gets up and tries to defend me, but the girl runs off the bus and I'm left thinking, frick man, where the frick is my emergency eye patch and am I going to be permanently blind in one eye? Oh my god, my depth perception is gonna be so out. Luckily she only got the tip of my eyelid. I still have a scar though. Never found her. I was puffy and gross for weeks. In SF on a bus when a 6'5", 270 pound completely naked white guy runs up to me and screams at the top of his lungs, "Give me $1," and I shout. No one tense up thinking he is gonna fight me, but then he just runs off and asks someone else. A group of 15 years olds rapping loudly to a beat from a cell phone. Anyone who's had to ride the subway without headphones will feel my pain. Or even with headphones. That crap is so loud I can't hear my nerdy podcasts. I was once on the New York subway traveling across town. Everything was going fine, but I noticed an older man up front. He was pretty dirty and had a nice beard going, so I thought that he might be homeless. He was just sitting there reading an old magazine when he started squirming around in his seat. He looked really uncomfortable, but I couldn't figure out why. After a few minutes he glanced around him. The subway was pretty empty. There was maybe 5 people between us. And then looked back down to his magazine. A stench starting working its way throughout the car, and then it hit me. I realized that he had just crap himself. He didn't seem worried, but I think everyone near me realized as they were gagging because of the smell. Those last few minutes on the subway felt like hours, and when it reached my stop I burst out the doors and took a massive gulp of air. Needless to say, I didn't take the subway back. This guy probably around 40 years old, on the bus in a Superman suit, cape, foam muscles, tights, the whole 9 yards. He then sits next to me, opens his backpack, which is filled to the brim with just oranges. I turn away for a moment, glance back at him disgusted, and he starts crying and rubbing an orange on my shoulder furiously. It was awful. A black dude was on a packed bus, and there was a Chinese dude right in front of him. Everyone was in everyone's personal space. Kissing distance. The Chinese dude lets out a huge yawn right in the black guy's face, without covering his mouth or anything. Almost engulped the black dude's face. In a split second the black guy grabs the Chinese guy's lips in a closed fist and starts stretching and shaking his face while yelling at him, "Don't you have any freaking manners?" To appease my new best friend. "You Ikebenf." All the whites on the bus watched and applauded. "Ha. Sucker, you made me yawn." I saw a guy take a pee on the floor once, but I'm pretty sure that's standard metro etiquette. Sorry for wasting everyone's time. Saw a guy Friday whip and out and pee in the car with people around. Look, it was nothing. Woman pee all over her duffel bag while on the train. Then she started swinging it around and pee flung in all directions at other passengers. She then got pee at her pee-drenched bag and threw it out of the train. Then she got in some guy's face about wanting M&Ms. While riding the subway, I saw a 5-year-old boy using nail clippers to trim the hair sprouting from a large mole on his mum's neck. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.